The morning sun spilled golden light across Accra, and Neca's small apartment buzzed with excitement. She moved carefully around the room, adjusting the delicate lace on her wedding gown, her heart fluttering with anticipation. Today was the day she had dreamed about for years, the day she would marry Kwame. Her best friends flitted around her, helping with hair, makeup, and last-minute details, their laughter and chatter filling the space. From the corner of the room, her sister Ajoa watched quietly, her expression unreadable but sharp. There was something in her eyes, a mix of jealousy, resentment, and something darker that made Neca's stomach tighten for just a moment. Ajoa didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence alone carried a tension that everyone else seemed oblivious to. Outside, cars arrived in a steady stream, bringing friends and family dressed in bright, celebratory colors. The air smelled of fresh flowers and the faint smoke of incense drifting from the ceremonial hall. Guests laughed and hugged, taking pictures and sharing excited whispers. The excitement was contagious, and Neca felt it lift her spirits even higher. But as she smoothed the folds of her gown one last time, she caught Ajoa's eye. Leaning close, her sister murmured a warning so soft it was almost lost beneath the noise of the arriving crowd. "You'll see you'll regret this." Neca blinked, startled, but she shook off the words, telling herself today was about love, joy, and the future waiting for her. And nothing, not even her sister's shadow, could take that away. The music swelled through the air, soft yet full of life, as Neca took her first steps down the aisle. Her heart raced with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Every eye in the room seemed to turn toward her, drawn to the glow of her white dress and the careful arrangement of her hair. The flowers lining the aisle smelled sweet, and the sunlight filtering through the windows painted golden streaks on the polished floor. Neca tried to breathe slowly, letting the joy of the moment fill her. This was the day she had imagined countless times, a day meant for love, for promises, and for a future with Kwame. But even in that perfect moment, a shadow lingered. Ajoa, standing just to the side, leaned closer, her lips barely brushing Neca's ear. "You'll regret this," she murmured, her voice soft but sharp, like a cold wind cutting through warmth. For a heartbeat, Neca froze. The words echoed in her mind, a strange mix of threat and sorrow, and her legs wavered slightly. She felt the weight of her sister's gaze, the hidden tension in the tilt of her head, and for a brief second, doubt flickered across her mind. Then she shook it off. Neca straightened, lifted her chin, and focused on Kwame. She could see him at the altar, standing tall and smiling, his eyes locked on hers, full of love and reassurance. That glance anchored her. She reminded herself that this day was theirs, that no whisper, no shadow of jealousy, could take away the happiness they had fought to find together. With a deep breath, she continued down the aisle, her steps steady, her smile radiant. Still, the moment did not go unnoticed. Some guests had caught the tension, their eyes flicking between the sisters with curiosity. Whispers began to ripple quietly through the crowd, quiet enough not to disturb the ceremony, but loud enough to plant questions in everyone's mind. Family members exchanged glances, sensing that beneath the celebration, something unspoken simmered. Even among the laughter and music, a subtle unease hung in the air, like a storm cloud just beyond the horizon. Neca felt it too, but she refused to let it touch her joy. With every step, she let the warmth of her friends, the love in Kwame's eyes, and the smiles of her family carry her forward. The aisle stretched on, but her resolve grew stronger. Today was about love, commitment, and a promise of a shared future. And even as Ajoa's words lingered like a whisper in the wind, Neca knew she would not let them define her moment. She reached Kwame with a heart full of hope, ready to face the rest of the day with grace, courage, and the certainty that happiness was hers to claim. The reception hall gleamed under strings of lights, flowers carefully arranged, and tables set with crisp linen. To everyone else, it looked like a perfect celebration. But behind the scenes, Ajoa's quiet sabotage had already begun. The wedding rings, meant to symbolize Neca and Kwame's lifelong commitment, had gone missing. Panic fluttered among the wedding planners as they searched frantically, whispering in corners. Some of the floral arrangements were slightly off, petals scattered on the floor instead of on the tables. A few chairs wobbled mysteriously, drawing small frowns from early arriving guests. Ajoa moved among the crowd with a practiced calm, her eyes glinting with satisfaction as she observed the tiny chaos she had created. She knew she had to keep her actions subtle, just enough to make the day feel slightly off without attracting immediate suspicion. A misplaced ribbon here, a dropped napkin there, a last-minute change in the seating chart. It all added up to a thread of tension weaving through the celebration. Guests whispered among themselves, sensing that something wasn't quite right, though they couldn't put their finger on it. Neca, however, remained unshaken. Even when a small argument broke out between the planners over missing cutlery, she smiled calmly, her eyes focused on Kwame and the excitement radiating from their friends and family. She had learned long ago that letting small disruptions steal her joy was a trap, and today was far too important to fall into it. Every time she spotted a hiccup, she took a slow, steadying breath and kept moving forward, offering reassurances and maintaining her graceful composure. The subtle chaos grew around her. A centerpiece tipped slightly as someone bumped the table, sending petals scattering like confetti. A microphone crackled during the first toast, making the speaker pause mid-sentence. A few children tripped over a loose wire, squealing and laughing, adding to the flurry of tiny crises. Each incident, though minor, seemed magnified in the eyes of the planners and some guests. Tension tickled the edges of the celebration, but Neca never let it touch her. Instead, she laughed with her friends, thanked her family for their support, and soaked in the music and colors of the day. She focused on the moments that mattered, the genuine smiles of her guests, Kwame's reassuring glance, the warmth in her parents' eyes. Ajoa's efforts, clever as they were, could not overshadow the love that filled the room. Every small mishap was a ripple against the tide of joy Neca carried with her. By the time the ceremony's first dance approached, the subtle sabotage had left its mark on the hall, but it had not touched Neca's spirit. She moved with grace, her laughter blending with the music, her smile unwavering. The day was hers, and she refused to let hidden malice define it. While whispers of confusion floated through the crowd, Neca's poise and determination ensured that her wedding remained a celebration of love, strength, and joy, untouched by her sister's quiet scheme. The reception hall was alive with music and chatter, glasses clinking and laughter spilling from every corner. Neca and Kwame had just finished their first dance, and the atmosphere was light, warm, and full of celebration. Guests were mingling, enjoying the food, and sharing stories of the couple when it was time for the toasts. The microphone crackled slightly, and the room quieted as family and friends prepared to speak. Ajoa stepped forward, her face carefully composed, but there was a tension in her posture, a glint in her eyes that hinted at her real intention. When the host introduced her, she leaned slightly toward the microphone and began, her tone sweet, almost polite. But the words she chose were anything but innocent. "I just hope Neca knows what she's getting into," she said, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. The words dripped with a thin veil of criticism, a subtle jab meant to unsettle her sister in front of everyone. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the underlying sting in her comment. Kwame, standing near Neca, caught the slight smirk on Ajoa's face immediately. He stepped forward with a calm, measured voice that carried across the room. "Thank you, Ajoa," he said, smoothly redirecting the attention back to Neca. "But today is about celebrating love, family, and the joy of this moment." His words were gentle but firm, leaving no room for further embarrassment. Ajoa's eyes flickered with frustration, realizing that her attempt to humiliate had been quietly deflected. She clenched her jaw, her fingers tightening around the champagne glass, but said nothing more, forced to step back. Around the hall, a few family members had noticed the unusual tension. Whispers passed from table to table, some noticing Ajoa's odd tone, others her fleeting smirk, and the way she lingered just a second too long near the microphone. No one could quite place the cause, but a sense of curiosity and unease began to spread. It was clear something wasn't right, yet the exact motive remained a mystery. Some guests speculated quietly, exchanging puzzled glances, while others simply focused on enjoying the celebration, not wanting to believe family could carry such tension into the day. Meanwhile, Neca smiled gracefully, unaffected on the surface by the subtle sting. She raised her glass with warmth, acknowledging the heartfelt toasts from her friends and elders, letting the joy of the moment fill the space. She felt Kwame's steady presence beside her, a quiet shield against any undercurrent of malice. The music resumed, laughter returned, and the celebration flowed on, but the careful observer could see the threads of conflict quietly weaving beneath the surface. Even as the party carried on, Ajoa's frustration simmered, her plan to unsettle Neca thwarted by Kwame's gentle but firm intervention. Guests remained unaware of the full tension, but the stage was set. The day's celebration, though radiant and full of love, now carried a subtle layer of intrigue, leaving a quiet question in the air. What would Ajoa do next? And how would Neca navigate the hidden currents of her sister's jealousy? The reception was in full swing, with music echoing through the hall and guests laughing and enjoying themselves. Neca moved through the crowd gracefully, smiling and thanking everyone who came to celebrate their wedding. But amidst the joy, her mind was occupied by a troubling discovery. Earlier that day, while helping organize some last-minute details, she had come across a set of documents tucked away in the planning office. Loan papers, receipts, and a few carefully hidden notes. Her heart sank as she realized what they meant. Ajoa had secretly borrowed money from Kwame's family to fund her own lifestyle. The shock hit Neca hard, but she didn't let it show. She quietly stepped aside, pulling Kwame close, her voice low so no one else could hear. "Kwame, I found something," she said, her tone calm but serious. She handed him the papers, watching his expression shift from curiosity to surprise, and then to controlled anger. They exchanged a few whispered words, plotting how to handle the situation without disrupting the celebration. Kwame's jaw tightened, but he nodded, his eyes reassuring Neca that they would address this together. For now, the guests remained blissfully unaware, enjoying the party, the food, and the dancing. Laughter rang out across the hall, and everyone seemed caught up in the celebration of love. But behind the scenes, tension was rising quickly. Kwame sought out Ajoa later, cornering her in a quiet hallway near the banquet area. His voice was firm but controlled as he confronted her with the evidence. Ajoa's initial reaction was surprise, quickly replaced by defensiveness, then frustration. She tried to argue, to justify her actions, but Kwame remained steady, pointing out the betrayal and the risk it posed to trust within both families. Ajoa's face flushed with a mix of anger and shame. She realized her schemes had gone further than she ever intended, and that the people she thought she could manipulate were now fully aware of her deception. She walked away, leaving Kwame and Neca in a tense silence that only the two of them understood. Meanwhile, Neca kept her composure in front of the guests, laughing politely at jokes, joining friends on the dance floor, and raising her glass for toasts. No one guessed the storm brewing just behind the scenes, the private tension that had the power to shift the entire day. Each time she caught Ajoa's eye across the hall, she felt a flicker of triumph mixed with caution. Her sister had been exposed, but the full reckoning was still to come. The revelation had changed the stakes entirely. What had started as subtle jealousy and minor sabotage had escalated into a serious confrontation, one that threatened to ripple beneath the surface of the celebration. Neca felt a surge of resolve. She would protect her day, her marriage, and her dignity, letting Kwame handle the confrontation. Even in the midst of hidden tension, she refused to let anything overshadow the joy and love surrounding her. Today was still theirs, and nothing, not even a sister's betrayal, would take that away. The music shifted, moving from soft background melodies to a vibrant traditional rhythm, the kind that made everyone's feet tap and bodies sway. Neca felt a spark of energy run through her as she took the center of the dance floor, her dress flowing with each step. She had always loved these traditional dances, the way they connected people to family, culture, and joy. Today, she decided, she would use it to reclaim the celebration, to push aside any shadow Ajoa had tried to cast. As the drumbeat grew stronger, Neca led the first steps with confidence. Her movements were graceful yet lively, each gesture radiating happiness and pride. Guests began to join in, clapping their hands and following her rhythm. The dance floor filled quickly with laughter, cheers, and excitement. Eyes turned to Neca, captivated by her energy, her skill, and the sheer joy she brought to the moment. Every spin and step seemed to erase the tension from earlier mishaps, redirecting attention towards celebration and unity. Ajoa, standing at the edge of the crowd, frowned as she watched. She decided to join in, attempting to mimic Neca's movements, hoping to regain some of the spotlight. But it quickly became clear she was out of step. Her arms flailed awkwardly, her footwork stumbled, and she nearly collided with a few guests who had tried to guide her. The crowd chuckled quietly at first, then laughter bubbled into full amusement as Ajoa struggled to keep up. Her attempt to shine backfired, creating a light-hearted yet public embarrassment. Neca, noticing her sister's clumsy efforts, smiled warmly but continued her dance without hesitation. There was no gloating, no pointed looks, just joy, energy, and presence. The contrast between Neca's grace and Ajoa's awkwardness only highlighted Neca's strength and poise. Guests cheered louder, clapping in rhythm and praising Neca's skill. Even those who had been distracted by the earlier tension now found themselves swept up in the fun, laughing and celebrating alongside her. As the dance progressed, it became a turning point for the day. What had been a moment shadowed by sabotage, jealousy, and whispered threats transformed into one of collective joy. The room was alive, filled with laughter, applause, and admiration. Ajoa's attempts to undermine Neca now seemed petty and transparent, fading against the overwhelming energy of the celebration. Even she seemed to recognize it, stepping back, her frustration barely hidden, but softened by the lightheartedness of the scene. By the end of the dance, Neca was glowing, her smile infectious, her confidence undeniable. She had turned what could have been a moment of conflict into one of triumph, capturing everyone's admiration and refocusing the day on love, culture, and happiness. The dance of defiance had done more than entertain. It had reminded everyone, including Ajoa, who held the true center of this celebration. The night was in full swing, the hall alive with music, laughter, and chatter. Guests were dancing, taking pictures, and celebrating the union of Neca and Kwame. Yet behind the laughter, a storm was quietly brewing. Ajoa, frustrated by her failed attempts to sabotage the wedding, pulled Neca aside under the pretense of a private conversation. Her voice was low, her tone edged with anger and warning. "You think you can just shine today and forget everything?" she whispered sharply. "This isn't over. You'll regret it." Neca stood her ground, taking a slow, steadying breath. Her body remained calm, her eyes meeting Ajoa's without fear. She had anticipated this confrontation and knew that reacting with anger would only give Ajoa the upper hand. "I'm not afraid of your words," Neca replied firmly, her voice quiet but resolute. "Today is about love and celebration. Nothing you say can take that away." She didn't move, didn't flinch, and that steady courage seemed to frustrate Ajoa even more. Kwame, sensing the tension, joined them quietly, his presence calm yet commanding. He had already reviewed the documents Neca had discovered, the loans, the receipts, the proof of deception. With a measured tone, he confronted Ajoa directly, laying out the evidence. "We know what you've done," he said, his eyes sharp. "All the money borrowed from my family, the schemes to disrupt this day. It stops now." There was no accusation in his tone, only firm clarity. Ajoa's confident mask began to crack. At first, she tried to argue, to twist the words, to make excuses. But the proof was undeniable, the calm firmness of Neca and Kwame unyielding. Slowly, panic began to replace the arrogance she had worn so easily earlier. Her shoulders slumped slightly, her voice grew unsteady, and the words she had rehearsed in her mind faltered. For the first time, she realized the consequences of her actions, that her schemes were not hidden, and that the day she had tried to control was slipping through her fingers. Meanwhile, Neca stayed composed, her posture straight, her face serene. She didn't gloat, didn't taunt, but the quiet strength in her presence made it clear that she had won this private battle. Kwame's support added weight to the confrontation, a silent reminder that they were united. Ajoa's eyes darted between the couple, finally registering that her attempts at manipulation had failed completely. As Ajoa stepped back, overwhelmed and panicked, Neca and Kwame exchanged a glance, a brief smile of reassurance passing between them. The confrontation ended without drama for the guests, who remained unaware of the tension that had quietly unfolded. But behind the scenes, the balance had shifted. Ajoa's schemes were exposed, her power broken, and Neca's strength and composure had prevailed. The day, once threatened by jealousy and sabotage, was now firmly back in the hands of love, courage, and truth. Over the reception hall, the DJ's voice came through the speakers, warm and clear, announcing a special moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very important part of tonight's celebration. We want to honor the values, strength, and achievements of Neca and her family." The crowd turned, curious, their attention shifting to the center of the room. Neca stepped forward, her heart steady and her smile calm. She felt the warmth of the spotlight, not with nerves, but with pride. Today had been a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and even attempts to undermine her, but she had stayed composed. Now, this moment felt like the perfect opportunity to show that integrity, loyalty, and honesty were stronger than jealousy or deceit. Taking the microphone, Neca spoke clearly, her voice carrying across the hall. "I want to thank my parents, my elders, and everyone who has guided me and supported me. Your love, your honesty, and your wisdom have shaped the person I am today. Today is not just about Kwame and me, it's about family values and the strength that comes from integrity." She paused, letting the words sink in. Guests listened, captivated by her sincerity, nodding in agreement, some even wiping small tears from their... As she continued, she subtly emphasized what had mattered most to her throughout the day: loyalty, kindness, and resilience. She spoke about choosing love over anger, joy over bitterness, and the power of staying true to oneself, even when faced with challenges. Every word highlighted the contrast between her own grace and composure and the quiet tension that had lingered earlier, unspoken but now apparent to anyone paying attention. From across the room, Ajoa's expression shifted visibly. Her previous confidence had eroded, replaced with regret and a sense of exposure. She could feel the room's admiration for Neca, the genuine applause and smiles directed at her sister, and she realized the stark difference between jealousy and dignity. It was a quiet, almost painful acknowledgement that she had failed, not with words or loud confrontation, but in the way everyone naturally gravitated toward Neca's integrity. The applause swelled, echoing through the hall. Guests cheered, clapped, and some even called out words of praise. Neca smiled warmly, raising her hands slightly in gratitude, her eyes scanning the crowd to meet those of friends and family who had been by her side through the day. Every clap, every smile reinforced that her composure and grace had triumphed, not through confrontation, but through character and patience. Even Ajoa, standing a little apart, could not escape the impact. She shifted uncomfortably, regret written across her face, realizing that admiration could not be forced, it had to be earned. Meanwhile, Neca's moment of public vindication solidified her presence as the center of the day, not just as a bride, but as a woman whose strength, honesty, and loyalty commanded respect. The celebration flowed on, brighter and freer than before, a true reflection of Neca's spirit and value. The DJ's voice cut through the lively chatter, drawing everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special surprise for the bride and groom. The lights dimmed, and a large screen flickered to life at the front of the hall. Guests leaned forward, curious, whispering in anticipation. Neca smiled, unaware of what was coming, while Ajoa shifted uneasily at the edge of the crowd, sensing something was about to happen. The screen lit up with footage taken secretly by friends who had noticed Ajoa's odd behavior earlier in the day. There she was, caught in small but deliberate acts of sabotage, hiding the wedding rings, nudging decorations out of place, and whispering sharply to planners to sow confusion. Each clip played in sequence, showing the meticulous ways Ajoa had tried to disrupt what should have been a joyful celebration. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people recognized moments that had seemed like innocent mistakes, realizing they were not accidents at all. Ajoa's confident composure crumbled as the evidence unfolded on the screen. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. She looked around the hall, seeing the shocked faces of friends and family, their eyes wide, eyebrows raised. She had expected secrecy, thought no one would notice, but now her actions were exposed to everyone at once. The room was silent for a moment, the music and laughter suspended as the audience processed what they were seeing. Neca remained calm, though her heart raced with a mixture of vindication and disbelief. She glanced at Kwame, who squeezed her hand, both of them exchanging a silent message of solidarity. Her eyes then flicked toward Ajoa, who could no longer hide the panic building behind her eye. The whispers and uneasy glances that had hovered all day crystallized into a clear understanding among the guests. Ajoa had tried to ruin this wedding. Finally, the DJ muted the screen, leaving Ajoa with no choice. She stepped forward, her face pale, her voice shaky as she addressed the room. I am sorry, Neca. I shouldn't have done what I did. I didn't mean for it to get this far. The apology was hesitant, but the sincerity in her voice, paired with the undeniable evidence behind her, left no room for doubt. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others whispering to each other, but all eyes were on the sisters. Neca took a deep breath, her smile steady and calm. She acknowledged her sister's apology with a simple nod, showing grace and forgiveness without diminishing the seriousness of the moment. The applause began slowly, then swelled as guests cheered for Neca, not only for her composure throughout the day, but for the way she handled the final, public revelation with dignity and strength. The montage had transformed the celebration. Ajoa's schemes were exposed, her power dissolved, and Neca's triumph was undeniable. What had begun as subtle sabotage became a public lesson in integrity, patience, and resilience. Guests admired her even more, and the energy in the room shifted fully back to joy, love, and celebration. Neca had not only survived her sister's attempts to undermine her, she had emerged victorious, respected, and celebrated by everyone present. The music shifted once more, this time to a lively, joyful rhythm that filled the hall with energy. Neca and Kwame took center stage for the final dance, moving together with ease and happiness. Their smiles were wide, their eyes bright, and every step seemed to celebrate not just their love, but the journey they had taken to reach this day. Guests gathered around, clapping, cheering, and joining in the rhythm, swept up in the couple's radiant energy. As Neca led Kwame through the steps, there was a sense of triumph in the air. The challenges of the day, the whispered threats, the sabotage, the tension, felt like distant echoes compared to the joy radiating from the dance floor. Friends and family celebrated her resilience openly, some cheering, some laughing, some wiping away tears of happiness. Every glance toward Neca reflected admiration, respect, and the recognition that she had handled every obstacle with grace and strength. It was a moment that turned the wedding into more than a celebration of love. It became a story of empowerment, courage, and triumph over adversity. From the edge of the crowd, Ajoa watched quietly, her posture stiff, her face marked with regret. She had tried, failed, and now had to accept the undeniable truth. Her actions could not overshadow Neca's spirit. Meanwhile, Neca danced confidently, her laughter ringing out, her presence commanding yet warm. The lights shimmered on the dance floor, casting a glow that seemed to follow her, highlighting the sense of promise and hope in her future. The evening drew to a close with Neca and Kwame at the center, radiant and victorious, surrounded by family and friends who had witnessed not just a wedding, but the power of resilience, integrity, and love. The final image lingered, Neca smiling confidently, her life ahead full of promise, while Ajoa stood aside, a quiet reminder of past struggles overcome and the bright path that lay before the bride.